So in our journey through stages of faith, we come to stage 3 today. But I want to remind us kind of where we've come, beginning with that little phrase I shared with you at the start. As we age, that is not something that's optional. Aging is not optional. We all grow old. That's something every one of us will do. But maturity is absolutely optional. We may or may not become mature as we get older. And we've talked about how the first piece of life is about building the container of our lives, building the identity of our person, the identity through which we will live the rest of our lives. We're building that identity as a member of a particular community, as a member of a family, as a member of an ethnicity, as a member of a religious community. We're building that container. Our career, our work identity. All of that is being built. That ego is being shaped and formed. And in the second half of life, we begin to take it apart because we discover its limits. And we discover its problems. The way in which it can get in the way instead of simply facilitate. The first 3 stages of faith are all about and correspond to that time we're creating the container of our lives. We're building the receptacle within which God will pour life for us to live. And so as we hit stage 3, we're experiencing kind of the last piece in that container building process. Now we've also been looking at the way this happens, not just individually, but corporately. For Israel, as Israel's faith is developing, we remember the stage of infancy when the very beginnings are about learning trust. Learning that the world around and the universe into which I have been brought is sufficient to give me what I need. That I can trust the universe and the one who stands behind that universe to be for me and not against me. And so as Abraham and Sarah are invited to trust God and move out into a place that they don't know, they learn the very basics and fundamentals of trusting God. And the faith is born in those early relationships. In toddlerness, we begin to learn the names. We name the world around us in our infant lives. And Israel begins to name the world and name God. Discovering different dimensions of God in different places as Abraham and Sarah move along through their lives. Jacob, Isaac, and Jacob, each of them experiencing God and expanding their sense and their understanding of who God is and where God lives and what God does. And then finally, or secondarily in this second stage, we're acquiring the stories that give identity to our faith and to our community. And so you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their story which is told. And then comes the enormous story and the experience of the liberation of the people from Pharaoh in Egypt. And that Exodus narrative shapes Israel foundationally, fundamentally, conferring an identity upon them as the people that were set free. And Moses invites them, challenges them to commemorate that every year by retelling that story in the Passover celebration. Instilling that story, deeply putting that story within them. Then comes Sinai. And there on Mount Sinai, the people of trust, the people of the story, become the people of the law. And the law is given to them. The law is given to them to help to shape their community, to define the boundaries of their behavior. And as it is with Israel, as they become a people of the law, so it is with us in our faith development, personally. We come to a place as we move out of childhood and into the latter years of elementary school and into adolescence, we become consummately preoccupied with what we should and shouldn't do. What are the boundaries of behavior that are important to our lives? We move, as Jean Piaget says in his theory of cognitive development, we move into a state stage where we're a little less egocentric. Everything is not all about me, but we're aware that other people have other ideas that are not necessarily the same as ours. But we want to know what they think about us. We want to know how other people feel toward us. And so we become preoccupied with learning the expectations of the teachers and the parents and the grandparents of the peer group that we want to be with. The peer group that says, this is the kind of tennis shoes you need to wear, and these are the kinds of places that you need to go, and the parents or teachers who say, this is what you need to do to be a good student in my class and to earn my favor. And if you do these things, you better watch out. We begin to get the guidelines, the rules and the regulations that define the box of our community's behavioral expectations. And as we start to acquire those, we hear things like this among children as they begin to acquire this sense of what the rules are. That's not fair! You ever hear that? That's not fair! Or you hear, he's breaking the rule, teacher! Or, Mommy, do you know what Jacob did? All of that behavior is about internalizing and using the boundary lines to reinforce the expectations. This is what I expect. This is what the people that I love and whose appreciation I want expect of me. So I will do these things. The conformity or conventionality is essential to our growth process. We must acquire the rules, we must internalize the rules if we're going to be able to work within a particular social context, if we're going to work within a particular religious community. All right? Schools are essential to this process in our society. It's in schools that kids learn basic behaviors, hopefully. Doesn't always happen. But teachers play an enormous role in helping confer the social expectations of our community. As we acquire these things, we're also growing in faith in similar ways. This third stage of faith is called the conventional stage of faith. We acquire the conventions of our faith, and we begin to internalize them and live out of those conventions or expectations. Here's what they say in summary about the third stage. This stage, typically between 11, 12 years old and into adult life, is characterized by conformity to religious authority and to the development of our personal identity. Any conflicts with one's beliefs are ignored at this stage due to the fear of threat from inconsistencies. We live according to the conventions because it's how we earn approval from those we seek to please. But this stage is clearly a stage of black and white, of yes and no, of this is correct, this is not correct. And it's important that we learn that. But it's also important that we grow beyond it. That we grow beyond it. Why? Well, here's the problem. Here's the good things about this stage, all right? The good things about this stage are we learn the boundaries, we learn the rules, we learn how to live within them. That's good. We earn a reputation for ourselves. You're either a good student or you're a bad student. You're a good kid or you're a bad kid, you know? Eres malcriado o eres bien educado, you know? We acquire a certain reputation during this time based on how well we do in this particular circumstance. We either become, if we do this, we become generally a good person or a good Christian. All right, we have a sense of what that means and what the expectations are. The problem, though, is that the world that we live in is not black and white. it's not. It just is not black and white. And so what happens is when we bring a black and white faith to a world that is multicolored and full of gray, there's dissonance that begins to emerge. We begin to feel the sense of, but that doesn't fit very well. A classic example historically is a Jew in Nazi Germany who is supposed to not to bear false witness according to the 10 Commandments. You don't bear false witness, all right? And the Nazis come to the door, knock on the door and say, "Are you a Jew?" Do I lie to protect my life and my family? Or do I tell the truth and go to the concentration camp? Not so black or white, is it? And there's myriad examples every day that we deal with. The problem with living in a black and white place of faith is that we are blinded when it comes to figuring out how to see things as they really are. Classically, people who are stuck in a black and white place deny the truth of things that contradict that black and whiteness. They deny the truth of that. The denial of the truth of climate change by some today as a religious doctrine. The denial of the truth of the bell curve of sexual orientation, which is like every other bell curve of any other trait in humanity, is denied because this is right, this is wrong, there's no in between. It's this way or that way, period. Black and white does not help us see the complexities and ambiguities of life honestly. It forces us either into a place of crisis and abandonment of faith, or we will push through that to a place that is able to live with faith and with ambiguity at the same time. And that's the challenge of moving from stage 3 to stage 4. Now in my life, when I was in stage 3, first of all, in high school, I was part of the doper community for the first 2.5 years of high school. And so I learned all the conventions, right? I learned how to roll a joint, I learned how to smoke a joint, I learned where we went, I learned all the conventions, how you share, I learned all that. All right? I learned the behaviors. I knew how to do the things that would make me accepted and appreciated by my peers. Then I had this encounter with Jesus that kind of shook me up and made me realize that maybe those were not the best conventions for me to be behaving by. And so I started acquiring a whole new set of conventions. I started acquiring a whole new set of rules and regulations. I got a girlfriend who was a Christian in a different church. She was in the evangelical free community, which is a pretty fundamentalist religious community. But I was attracted by it. There was real clear black and white understanding of what was right and what was wrong, and I kind of needed that at that point in time. I had trouble with that. I needed some help in that regard. So I became fully invested in this community. A black and white community. Not racially, but intellectually. You were a Christian, you were going to heaven if this, and this were happening in your life. And if they weren't, you were going to hell, and that was crystal clear. Well, in the middle of our relationship, Vicky's older sister, who was kind of dabbling in some Wiccan stuff, much to her father, the elder in the church's utter angst, killed in a car wreck. And so the whole family that had absolute clarity about who went to heaven and who went to hell were now faced with the reality of, am I going to live for the rest of my life believing that my daughter is now in hell? Can I do that? for some of the members of that family, the ambiguity of that reality forced them back into rigidity. For other members of the family, it moved them into a place of being able to accept some fudge room on those black and white issues for the first time. As I acquired this kind of rigid experience of faith, I started acquiring some of the beliefs that were part of this evangelical free church, one of which was that the Bible is absolutely without error in all aspects. It is inerrant. There is nothing wrong at all. In science, in however you want to, it's without error. And so I started spouting that in my own church group, in the Presbyterian church, and my pastor pulled me aside and said, you know, that's not exactly what we believe as Presbyterians. And let me tell you why. And so he started opening up the scriptures, and he said, for example, you know, in Holy Week, that's a pretty important period of Jesus' life, you know. Did Jesus die on the Passover, or did he not die on the Passover? Did he eat a Passover with his friends, or did he not? And we opened up and we looked at how Matthew, Mark, and Luke say one thing, and John says something utterly different. There's no Last Supper in John. There's only a foot washing. There's no foot washing in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's only a Last Supper. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus has the Passover supper and then he dies the next day. In John's Gospel, the Passover begins the next day. And so Jesus dies at the moment that all the Passover lambs are being slaughtered at the temple as the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. They're different. So all of a sudden, I was like, oh, what do I do with this? This is not comfortable. And I had to start wrestling with the ambiguities of what is really there. Instead of going, no, we just don't quite understand it right. It's absolutely without error, but we will figure it out. Maybe down the road we'll understand. No, they're different, but it's okay. Now, for me, it wasn't okay then. I had a hard time with that. It put me into this place of angsty confusion and uncertainty about my faith and because if these things were wrong, then my whole faith was going to fall apart. That was the fear. You see, that's the fear. And that fear, if we can't push through it, will push us back into a regression of an earlier stage that feels more comfortable and secure and clear. That's what we do. We either push through or we go backwards. The story about the Apostle Paul that I told is a consummate example of someone who is in stage 3 and who believes the law, who believes the rules, who believes the black and white, and who understood and saw Jesus as an absolute violator of those conventions that were essential to the identity of the people. Richard Rohr, when talking about this, he says, it's almost like Jesus just kind of hung out at home until it came Sabbath day. And then he went out on the Sabbath and did all this stuff because he knew it was going to piss everybody off. And he did. He went out on the Sabbath. He was constantly doing things on the day you're not supposed to be doing things. And it made people so mad at him. It made Saul, so mad at him that he was ready to imprison or kill every single person who was talking about him or following him, even after he had died. What happened to him on that road to Damascus, that lightning bolt of awareness and discovery and encounter with the living Jesus, all of a sudden put all that into disarray. And he saw himself for the first time as a man of the law who had become a hater in the name of the law of God. That was not okay anymore. So next week, we're going to look at that transition time between stage 3 and stage 4. Because inevitably, the shift from stage 3 to stage 4, from legalistic to a little more flexible, is a process that requires a crisis of some kind, a shattering of some kind, a discovery of something bigger that doesn't fit into what I've known up until now. And until that happens, we can be comfortable little clams in our clamshell of law and order. But when it happens, if it opens our hearts, it will make things new. Often in our real world, not just in the religious world, I shouldn't say real world, in the world beyond the church, and sometimes in the world within the church, it is actually love itself that blows that apart. When the conventions and the norms of segregated society say that blacks and whites can't marry, and all of a sudden you find yourself in love with a person of the other race, love blows apart the conventions. In a world where Catholics and Protestants are not supposed to be joined to one another, and you fall in love with a Catholic girl or a Catholic boy, as so few people in this room have done, blows apart the conventions. And when you find yourself falling in love as a Christian with a Muslim, as one of the past secretaries of our presbytery did, or if you find yourself falling in love with a person who is Jewish, or Buddhist, or Hindu, all of a sudden, love opens you up beyond the ambiguity. I think love, fundamentally, is the force that God has put in the world to break things down. Help us see, help us really understand that we are one. And that is far more important than all the little things that we've done to create containers that define us, and shelter us, and blind us to that truth. Let's pray. God, for the gift of the law, we give you thanks. For the clarity that it offers, for the wisdom that it gives us, that helps us see ourselves if we are willing to turn it inward. To see the places of our weakness, to see fundamentally our need for you. We give you thanks for that function of this law. But forgive us, please, and lead us beyond that place that would turn the law into a hammer to slam other people with. Give us the grace of some huge moment of ambiguity or gray that would open our black and white world to the technicolor reality of your grace. For we pray in Jesus' name.